The economy is massively struggling right now. Even though the headlines are we are heading into a recession, we've pretty much been in one for the last 6 months at least. Even if you want to change the definition of recession to say that we technically weren't, it really did feel like one. And that's led to massive layoffs across the entire economy, but really focusing in the tech sector that has lost nearly 70,000 jobs, which is probably a pretty scary thing to see because the tech sector is the most profitable and most cash heavy sector in the entire world. So if they are laying people off and they have to let people go, that might mean we're in some pretty tough times ahead. There's a long list of companies within this tech sector that have laid people off, including the absolute massive companies like Google laid off 12,000 jobs, Microsoft, they laid off 10,000, Amazon 18,000, Crypto.com is in the 500. Coinbase is at 2,000. They started at 1,100. Just recently cut another 950 jobs. Salesforce cut 7,000 jobs. Facebook, 11,000 jobs. Twitter, we've all known that, 3,700 jobs. Lyft has cut 700. Stripe at 1,100. Shopify at 1,000. Snapchat at 1,000. Robinhood at 1,100. And Tesla at 6,000 jobs. So obviously, massive numbers of jobs lost just in the tech sector alone. And the fear is that this spills over into the broader economy, into retail and other stores like Walmart or these retail stores, and they end up needing to lay people off, and then we could have an entire mess of an economic problem on our hands. Because if the sector that has the most amount of money, tech, is flushed with cash, they're pretty much the most profitable industry on the entire planet. They pretty much print money. But the one thing you might have noticed about these tech jobs, we saw the other giants, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, we saw them in the list of companies laying off people. There was one company that was missing from that list, and that was Apple. And you might be able to say that they're been a little bit more responsible in the past over the pandemic with hiring and everything. We'll look at some charts for that. But when you look at Apple, I really like Apple as a company. I have Apple stock. I think that they are the closest thing to a money printer that we have, and that's not the Fed. The amount of money Apple makes is an insane, ridiculous amount of money, and obviously they know how to manage it correctly because they are the only ones who haven't laid people off yet. Now, could they start laying people off? Absolutely, and if they did, hopefully it would be a less number than everybody else, but obviously any layoffs kind of really suck. But right now, Apple, just like when the recession talks were starting last year, Apple was the only stock holding up the entirety of the stock market. Now, Apple's the only company holding up this kind of tech labor market. You've got some talking points here of someone here saying Apple is the only major tech company that hasn't done a big layoff. Instead, the CEO took a $50 million pay cut, which is obviously a ton of money. But at the end of the day, it doesn't save that many jobs. I think someone did the math. It's about 350 salaries or about 350 jobs they'd be able to save from that, which is great. If nobody has to get laid off at Apple and all it took was Tim Cook taking a pay cut, I think that's amazing and makes Apple look like an even better company. But when you compare these companies and the layoffs that have happened, you see big tech is in its big layoff era, but Apple's holding strong. You see all these different companies, the big tech, the big players in big tech here. Facebook, they grew over the pandemic here, right? From 2018, it wasn't really the pandemic, but 2018 to 2022, we'll call it pandemic growth, 144%. Google grew 89% since 2018. Microsoft grew 69% and Apple grew 24%. So obviously looking at this, you can see much more explosive growth out of companies like Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, but Apple a little more consistent, not as much growth in employees. Now, looking at these numbers, it would be more comparable to Microsoft because they have 131K in 2018, Apple 132K, which obviously is way more than Facebook's 36K or Google's 99K. But this maybe looks a lot more responsible, where management of Apple was a little bit more responsible and hired sustainably It's a lot better to hire sustainably and maybe hire less people over the 2 years or comparable years here. But when times get tough, be able to retain the people and the employees and the talent you have instead of laying people off. It makes it a lot easier for everybody. Nobody likes layoffs. Companies aren't sitting out there saying, I can't wait to lay off 10,000 people. If they could keep those people and keep their profits and increase their profits, I'm sure they would rather do that. The fact of the matter is, that's just not where we are right now. And companies are looking for ways to save money because the economy is absolutely devastated. And in order to maintain their profit lines, their revenue lines, and their bottom line, really, the only thing they can control is their expenses. A company's biggest expense is their labor. But when comparing the big tech companies, like everyone looks at these numbers saying, this is obviously a lot more exciting when companies are growing these 90%, 70, 144%. They're growing. It gives a lot more jobs immediately. But this downtick year is a lot more hurtful. So obviously this sucks maybe a little bit more than how much this felt good, right? In Apple, this still feels good. And if they just level off and don't lay off anyone, that's going to be a major win for them. But when you look at big tech, and you look at the amount of money that these guys got, you can see Amazon, they laid off 1.2% of workforce. Google hit 6.4%, Meta at 12.6%, and Microsoft at 4.5%. So they laid off a lot of workers. Between these companies, over 50,000 workers, or almost 50,000 workers, laid off just from these four companies. Of these 70,000 or more that was laid off in total around tech, came from the big tech companies. And that's crazy to think of when you look at cash on hand. Amazon, $60 billion and net profit of $11 billion. Google, over $100 billion of cash on hand. Meta, 42. Microsoft, over $100 billion too. And these companies print money. Google, $67 billion in profit. Meta, $29 billion. Microsoft, $70 billion. That's massive amounts of money that these guys just literally print. Big tech is massively profitable. There's a lot of thoughts that go into this of like, why are companies like Amazon and Google, Facebook, Microsoft, why are they laying people off? If they have so much cash on hand, they make so much money, and the real reason that you could think of is that they're just looking to save their bottom line. The companies obviously are for profit, and in an economy that is really slowing down, that is really starting to hurt, and people are not going out and buying things, right? That economy looks a lot different, and it could be preparing for that. It could be to make sure that they solidify their bottom line and make sure that that doesn't fall, because if that falls, then their stock price falls, and if their stock price falls, that could lead into them needing to lay off even more people. So if they can get ahead of this a little bit and prevent the stock price from being impacted and the way they offer compensation with stocks and stuff, maybe they can save a few other thousand jobs if the stock starts, or their bottom line starts to get affected. But these big tech layoffs are insane. There's tens of thousands, nearing 100,000 jobs from just this sector alone. And if that pours over to the overall economy, to the retail sector, and these other companies have to start laying people off too, I think it gets really, really dirty, really, really bad, really quick. Hopefully we don't need to see that happen. Hopefully the economy somehow turns around. I don't see that really happening in the short term here. I think there's a lot of pain ahead, and hopefully it doesn't spill over, but right now it's just looking pretty crazy. But that's going to do it for this video. As always, don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe. I'll see you guys in my next